presentation of Victory News is paid for by the partners of Kenneth Copeland Ministries. Visit kcn.org/support.
Welcome to Victory News Tonight for Tuesday, March 10th, 2026. I'm Mike Garofalo.
And I'm Kit Hernandez. Here are a few of the headlines we're watching for you now.
Apple News says they've increased their conservative news content, but research shows they went from 0 to a whopping 2%. Victory News contributor Keisha King will discuss why Apple is afraid of balanced news coverage, apparently.
And U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the U.S. will not tolerate hostage diplomacy, and the 100 hostages returned since Donald Trump took office are proof. Ahead, former Congressman Lieutenant Colonel Alan West tackles this and more. But first, let's go to tonight's top stories. We have a severe weather alert to tell you about. Victory News meteorologist Captain Tom Amos is calling for scattered severe thunderstorms today from the southern plains into the southern Great Lakes region. Strong tornadoes, very large hail and damaging winds are all possible for more than 15 million Americans in the region. On Wednesday, isolated to scattered severe thunderstorms remain possible from the Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas region through the lower Mississippi Valley and northeast into the Ohio Valley. Shots were fired earlier today at the U.S. Consulate in Toronto. Canadian police were called to the building just before 5:30 a.m. and found evidence of gunfire. Ontario Premier Doug Ford responded to the incident on X, saying the shooting that took place at the U.S. Consulate early this morning is an absolutely unacceptable act of violence and intimidation aimed at our American friends and neighbors. According to police, information on a suspect and a motive is under investigation. Additionally, according to U.S. News and World Report, an IED exploded at the U.S. Embassy in Oslo, Norway on Sunday, causing minor damage and no injuries. A funding lapse at the Department of Homeland Security is now disrupting airport security nationwide. TSA officers are currently working with reduced pay and could soon receive no paychecks at all if the shutdown continues. Staffing shortages are already causing major delays, with wait times reportedly reaching up to 3.5 hours at some airports. Travelers are also flying without reliable updates. The TSA website and mobile app were paused on February 17 and won't be updated until funding is restored, leaving passengers without current security wait time information. Some airports are warning travelers to arrive 3 to 4 hours early for flights. A Georgia community is grieving after a high school educator died Friday in Gainesville. Jason Hughes slipped and fell while chasing 5 teenagers who had covered his yard in toilet paper. After falling, the 40-year-old math teacher was accidentally run over by a vehicle. Breitbart News reports his widow, Laura, wants all charges against the students dropped, calling it a, quote, terrible tragedy. She reportedly said punishing the teens would go against Jason's dedication to helping young people. Right now, 18-year-old Dadine Wallace faces a vehicular homicide charge, while the other students were charged with trespassing and littering. Authorities say the teens immediately tried to help Hughes, who later died at the hospital. The community is remembering Hughes as a devoted husband, father, and teacher. Let's keep this family in our prayers, Mike.
Yes, if you are. And during a press conference on the war in Iran this morning, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth was asked about the length of the mission.
Our will is endless. Ultimately, the president gets to determine the end state of those objectives, right? But what he's said continually, and I want the American people to understand, is this is not endless. It's not protracted. We're not allowing mission creep. The president has set a very specific mission to accomplish, and our job is to unrelentingly deliver that.
And Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair General Dan Kane spoke of fallen U.S. Army soldier Staff Sergeant Benjamin Pennington.
When I met Ben's family last night, his mom, his dad, and his sister, they showed me a picture, a drawing that Ben had made when he was in kindergarten. It was clear all the way back then that Ben wanted to do one thing in his life, and he wanted to serve his country and be a soldier. And to the Penningtons, just know how Ben was absolutely a great one.
On Monday evening, President Trump posted this threat against Iran if what's left of its military fires on oil tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz, writing this: if Iran does anything that stops the flow of oil within the Strait of Hormuz, they will be hit by the United States of America 20 times harder than they have been hit thus far. The president went on to say death, fire, and fury will rain upon them, but I hope and pray that it does not happen. President Trump also added, this is a gift from the United States to China and other nations whose oil comes through the strait. U.S. intelligence officials say they have intercepted encrypted communications believed to have originated in Iran that could function as an operational trigger for sleeper cells located outside the country. ABC News reported Monday they reviewed the warning that this was sent to multiple countries shortly after Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's death, and the message appeared to be intended for clandestine recipients who had the encryption code. Reportedly, the transmission could provide instructions to pre-position sleepers operating outside the originating country and warranted heightened awareness. Fior.
Mike, at today's White House press briefing, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt made it clear the administration wants the partial government shutdown to end.
President Trump wants the Department of Homeland Security, he wants TSA, he wants FEMA, he wants the brave men and women of our United States Coast Guard to receive their paychecks, and he wants this department to be fully funded and fully reopened. And so to any American out there who is struggling without a paycheck, we know there's more than 100,000 of you across the country. To any American out there who is showing up to an airport and facing incredibly long wait times and lines, call your Democrat member of Congress and tell them to fund the Department of Homeland Security.
Leavitt said the American people are suffering due to the partisan games being played by Democrats on Capitol Hill. President Donald Trump has rejected Joe Biden's claim of executive privilege over a set of documents requested by Senate investigators. In a letter to the National Archives, Trump's counsel, David Warrington, said the privilege claim, quote, is not justified, and instructed the agency to release the materials to Congress. The dispute centers on documents tied to probes into President Biden's health, alleged politically motivated investigations targeting Trump and his allies, and the Biden family's business dealings. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker is putting tax cuts at the center of his 2026 re-election bid, unveiling the Keep Your Pay Act. It would eliminate federal income taxes on the first $75,000 earned by most households. According to Fox News, the bill also raises the standard deduction, boosts the child tax credit up to $4,320 for young children, and triples the earned income tax credit. Tim?
Your Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Monday that the U.S. will not tolerate hostage diplomacy during the hostage and wrongful detainment ceremony at the State Department.
And we're here on the third U.S. Hostage and Wrongful Detainee Day, and it's a day that exists because families and loved ones refuse to let their loved ones be forgotten. We have this day to celebrate those who returned, to honor those who perished in captivity, and commit to returning those who are still in detention and holding also the perpetrators of this accountable.
Now, Rubio said more than 100 hostages have returned home since Donald Trump took office. Now, the Secretary emphasized March 9th was the anniversary of the day Robert Levinson, a former FBI agent, went missing in Iran in 2007. According to FBI, Levinson most likely died in captivity in Iran. Joining us now is former Congressman and retired Lieutenant Colonel Alan West. Colonel, what's your reaction to the Secretary of State's comments on hostages and negotiations in light of our current conflict with Iran?
I think it's very important. It's very critical. We saw an incredible spate of that all across the Middle East, going back to the early days when the Iranian regime took power, taking CIA station chiefs and executing them, things of that nature. Americans need to know that wherever they go in the world, they're going to be safe and they're going to be regarded, they're going to be respected. And those enemies of the United States needs to understand there are consequences and ramifications to impeding, obstructing, or doing other things to prevent Americans from having their freedom of maneuver and freedom of travel. And I think President Trump has expressed that very well. And we all remember that the Iranians released those hostages after Ronald Reagan won the election, didn't even wait for him to take office. They knew how serious he would be in office.
Yeah, the world knows that President Trump does not play games. Now, Governor Tim Walz, he offered an update on the billions of dollars in Minnesota, the fraud that happened on his watch. Here's his message today.
I think Minnesotans have to recognize is You're hearing about fraud in Minnesota because we are prosecuting people.
What's your perspective on those comments, Colonel?
That's about as delusional and deranged as you get. You're hearing about it because people are reporting it. The young man who went out there and went on the ground and uncovered all of that fraud, that's the reason why we're hearing about it. Governor Tim Walz and also Attorney General Keith Ellison have known about this. Representative Ilhan Omar, those are some of her close associates, friends, and campaign supporters. And it's kind of interesting that you have someone like Representative Omar that goes from $50,000 of worth to $30 million of worth in just a short period of time of her being there in office. So these elected officials are dirty, they're guilty, and they cannot wash their hands. They can't do the Pontius Pilate on this one.
All right. Now, Senator John Kennedy exposed the open border support from the Cato Institute's David Byer. You're going to love this.
You said, quote, they, referring to Republicans, think they can troll their way into us accepting ethnic cleansing.
Thank you. These are not hyperbolic statements. I appreciate you reading my account. I appreciate.
Here's the good news.
What planet did you just? Wait a minute, Mr. Chairman. What planet did you just parachute in from?
No.
Okay, sir. What's your critique on David Byer's framing deportation of illegal immigrants as ethnic cleansing?
Well, you know, the Cato Institute is a bit of a libertarian institute, not really a constitutional conservative think tank. And it's very questionable. Why would they not be on the side of the Constitution? Why would they not be on the side of our national sovereignty? And I think that the young man who was being questioned there needs to understand that when you write it down, people can remember it. I mean, we can go back like Tim Russert used to do in the old days of Beat the Press and just say, roll tape number 2, and we can see exactly what you said. So I don't know if this young man will be at Cato Institute for much longer.
Speaking of seeing exactly what you said, Texas Democrat Senate candidate James Tallarico says abortion is not immoral. He explains why.
So most Americans, and I'm talking 90, 95%, do not believe that an embryo is a legal person. Now, the embryo is biologically alive. That is certainly true. But being alive and being a person are two different things. Quick answer on this one, Colonel. Tallarico says being alive and being a person are two different things. What kind of Christianity is he practicing?
You know, I've nicknamed him Woke Jesus James, and this is not Christianity. Obviously, he has not studied or read Jeremiah 1 and 5, which says, I knew you before I formed you in the womb. And I believe Deuteronomy 30 and 19, where God says to choose life so that you and your descendants shall live. God is definitely on the side of life. And the number one unalienable right that we have, not endowed to us by the government, but by the Creator God, is life.
Pretty simple, Colonel. Thank you for that. We'll be back to you in just a few minutes. Mike?
Thank you, Tim. No more Small Business Administration loans for foreigners on Monday. The SBA announced a new policy banning foreign nationals and non-citizens from receiving any SBA small business loans. Under the rule, applicants must be U.S. citizens or U.S. nationals whose primary residence is in the United States. The change expands an earlier policy that already made businesses partly or fully owned by foreign nationals ineligible for the agency's main SBA 7A loan program and SBA 504 loan program. The new rule will take effect 30 days after publication. Tim?
Mike, intelligence agencies in the Netherlands are warning that Russian hackers have launched a global cyber campaign to gain access to some popular communication apps. According to the General Dutch Intelligence Agency and Dutch Military Intelligence, hackers have likely gained access to Signal and WhatsApp accounts used by officials, military personnel, and journalists. Reportedly, users are persuaded in chats initiated by hackers to divulge security verification and PIN codes, giving them access to personal accounts and group chats. According to a spokesman, Dutch authorities issued a cyber advisory notifying government colleagues of the vulnerability and providing assistance to eliminate the threat. And also amid concerns of cybersecurity in Texas, the governor, Greg Abbott, has directed state health agencies and public university systems to review possible risk with Chinese-made medical devices. According to Texas Scorecard, Abbott sent a letter Monday to several state agencies ordering officials to assess cybersecurity protections and inventory network-connected medical devices in state-owned facilities. At issue are certain Chinese-manufactured patient monitoring devices that could allow unauthorized actors to remotely control the device, bypass cybersecurity protections, and access sensitive information about patients if connected to the internet. The agencies have been directed to submit their findings and recommendations to Abbott's office by April 17th. Fior?
Thank you, Tim. Today marks 6 months to the date when a fatal shot fired interrupted the lives of many, particularly Christian conservatives. On September 10th, 2025, Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk was assassinated while speaking on a college campus in Utah. Much has ensued since.
At the onset of Charlie Kirk's passing, we saw thousands accepting Jesus into their lives and even revival at college campuses and churches.
Certifiably 533 decisions for Christ.
But we also saw social media flooded with theories about who or what was really behind it all, and it's a trend creating much divide. 22-year-old Tyler Robinson has been charged with Kirk's murder, and the case is still in the pretrial phase. But this fact has not deterred speculations.
I've seen enough. Erica Kirk should be dragged into a police precinct for questioning.
Influential podcaster and longtime friend of Charlie's, Candace Owens, has publicly speculated that Charlie's assassination might involve internal betrayal within TPUSA. She's even implied his widow, Erica, is somehow involved and is pointing to Freemasons and Israel for allegedly pulling the strings.
48 hours before Charlie Kirk died, Charlie informed people at Turning Point, as well as Jewish donors and a rabbi, that he had no choice but to abandon the pro-Israel cause outright.
Owens released text messages in October from Charlie.
I cannot and will not be bullied like this, leaving me no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause.
Charlie Kirk's show producer, Andrew Colvette, confirmed the authenticity of the messages.
That was a text grab, a screen grab that I had shared with people. So it is authentic.
And listen to conservative icon Tucker Carlson's eulogy at Charlie's funeral. It was particularly concerning for many.
And I can just sort of picture the scene in a lamplit room with a bunch of guys sitting around eating hummus, thinking about what do we do about this guy telling the truth about us. We must make him stop talking. And there's always one guy with the bright idea, and I could just hear him say, I've got an idea, why don't we just kill him?
What we do know to be true is that Charlie's words of wisdom resound even today.
It says in the scriptures that God will use all things for his good for those who love him.
There can be brighter days ahead for the Iranian people. And just look at some of these pictures of how beautiful Iran used to be, how beautiful Tehran used to be.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a public statement denouncing claims of involvement as a monstrous lie.
Thank you, Fior. Apple News has increased its right-leaning content from 0% to 2%, but it sounds like damage control to me.
Me too. Victory News contributor Keisha King with that and more coming up.
Trust. It's something we earn. Trust is a precious thing where delivering the news is concerned. Here at Victory News, we understand that. At one time, they called Walter Cronkite the most trusted man in America. But his network, along with many others, spent the last several decades betraying that trust. Today, the major news outlets are well-funded, but bankrupt of integrity. They no longer view it their job to report the facts. Instead, their mission is to advance an agenda. This is why, at great expense, Victory News was launched. And since that launch, we worked hard to deserve your trust. And in doing so, we hope we've now also earned your involvement. We encourage and invite you to go online to govictory.com/news to find out how you can stand shoulder to shoulder in championing truth and faith with us in these momentous times. Victory News. Facts. Faith. Freedom.
After being called out by the Federal Trade Commission for ignoring right-leaning news organizations, Apple News has increased its right-leaning content from 0% to 2%. According to the Washington Times, a report from the Media Research Center claims that Apple News showed a strong political imbalance in February, with only about 2% of featured articles coming from right-leaning outlets. The group said the Apple News had previously gone 100 days without any feature stories from right-of-center articles before including a story from Fox News. Media Research Center President David Bozell argued the small increase reflects damage control after criticism and a warning from Federal Trade Commission Chairman Andrew Ferguson. All right, let's welcome in the host of the Keisha King Show. Keisha, welcome back to Victory News.
Thanks for having me.
Keisha, is Apple News adding 2% conservative news sources to their page from zero an acceptable action to balance their coverage?
Absolutely not. How would that be balanced? It is insane. But this has been going on since President Trump came down the escalator in 2015. The media lost their minds, and they continue to lose their minds. But what is positive that we can take from this story is, because we have been relentless in being bold and standing up for what we believe as Republicans, conservatives, that they feel now that they need to boost their conservative media because our voices are getting stronger and louder.
Yeah, and they've got a long way to go. Minnesota Democrats, Keisha, brought a land history expert in to help determine, listen to this, whether wild rice has an inherent right to life.
That doctrine does not grant any right to wild rice. Rather, it recognizes that the plant's inherent right to live exists because it is alive.
Keisha, 2 years ago, the state body voted for abortion to be legal up to the moment of birth. Should wild rice have more protections than an unborn child?
You know, when I read this, I was disturbed because not only did they told us exactly who they are. They voted for abortion up until the moment of birth, but they want to say that wild rice, has this inherent right to life. Well, they are doubling down essentially on what they think about human beings. They are saying that those who are made in the image of God, you don't mean anything apparent by their vote to have abortion up until the moment of birth. So this is just another way that the left is showing us exactly who they are. And when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time.
That's a very good point. Now, Teachers Union President Randy Weingarten wants school curriculums from the World Economic Forum. Listen to this.
You're the one who said you can't keep on doing this governor by governor. How do we use the WEF to create this kind of integrated network so that we're all working together, so that kids can have, from high school on, opportunities?
Keisha, she says this will lead to high-paying jobs for students right out of school. What's your take?
Where's the evidence? You know, I am so sick of these people who get on TV or in front of a group and they spew these talking points out there and they are never asked to back it up. She's talking to the World Economic Forum. Why is that? How is that going to create jobs and good paying jobs for American students? I really wish they would have pressed her on that. But this is Randy Weingarten, the same woman who wanted to keep kids locked out of schools during COVID, the same woman who is totally fine with showing children inappropriate materials in school. I don't trust anything that this woman says. She does not care about students and she does not care about America.
And Keisha, Maxine Duran, a man pretending to be a woman, is running for governor of Idaho as a socialist on a platform of taxpayer-funded abortion on demand and trans surgeries for your kids. How do you think his campaign will go over in Idaho?
Politicians do tend to sometimes, put their finger in the wind to see where the wind is blowing. Maybe he wants to do this right now because we're not trying. In case he didn't know, Kamala lost because she ran on the trans thing. So it's not something that us Americans that we want, and certainly nothing that women want. So I would suggest that he actually figure out what Americans want, and we don't want that.
Yep. Good point. Now, to find out more about Keisha, visit KeishaKing.com and check out the Keisha King Show on YouTube. Thanks for being with us today, Keisha.
Thank you for having me.
You bet, Fior.
Mike, in the first year of President Trump's second term, ICE operations have led to the arrest of more than 400 child sex offenders. According to Center Square, last year there were 414 arrests of illegal foreign nationals who were either charged with or actually convicted of child sex offenses. ICE says all total, those arrested were charged with 761 child sex offenses and 525 other criminal offenses ranging from homicide to robbery. Tim?
For a huge win for Christ over the weekend in Lima, Peru, with upwards of 90,000 people in attendance to hear Franklin Graham's altar call, with thousands choosing to give their lives to the Lord.
You have a choice tonight. Jesus said, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. Will you come to him tonight? I want you to come right now wherever you are. You're coming to your Father in heaven. So come to Jesus. Come to him.
Boy, it reminds you of his father's meetings all those years ago. This historic Esperanza Lima outreach took place in a packed national stadium on Saturday and Sunday. Mike?
Tim, before we go, let's talk with Lieutenant Colonel Alan West one more time. Sir, well, Franklin Graham preached the gospel in Peru. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth was also sharing God's word in a press conference. Take a listen.
Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. He is my loving God and my fortress, my stronghold and my deliverer, my shield, in whom I take refuge.
So, Colonel, do you see a strong spiritual commitment over Operation Epic Fury?
Yes, without a doubt, because it really is good versus evil. When you think about the #1 sponsor of Islamic terrorism in the world, how they treat women and how they have brought so much death and destruction on Americans and people all across the globe. Yes, this is without a doubt something that needs to be elevated, and we need to discuss that, and people need to understand that this is the face of evil that we are confronting. And always remember 2 Corinthians 3:17, the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. That's where you find true freedom and true liberty. That's what Franklin Graham was talking about.
Colonel, real quickly, you wrote an editorial piece recently entitled, Who Owns the American Story? Tell us why you chose that topic.
Well, we got to be very concerned about who's trying to buy content and movie-making rights in the United States of America. And when you look at this, there are Chinese investors, there are people in the Middle East, Qatar, who is the second greatest sponsor of Islamic terrorism. And so what I wanted to do in that op-ed piece was to bring out the concerns that we have, because politics flows downstream of the culture. That's what Andrew Breitbart said.
Yeah, very good point. Be sure to check out that article at amgreatness.com or on X at Alan West. Colonel, always great to have you with us.
My pleasure. God bless, and thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. All right, Greg Stevens, what's on the agenda for Unclassified tonight?
Hey, thanks, Mike. On Unclassified tonight, it has been 6 months since Charlie Kirk was assassinated and taken from us. And we're going to have an open and honest conversation with two people who